And joining us now on the Medi-Share guest line is a play-by-play announcer and color analyst for the Colorado Rockies, Jerry Schemmel. Before that, he was a play-by-play guy for the Denver Nuggets, the Minnesota Timberwolves, and Colorado State. He is a survivor of the crash landing of United Airlines Flight 232 back in 1989, and he wrote a book about it called Chosen to Live. He also is a cyclist, and in 2018, we had Jerry on our show to talk about the Godspeed documentary about his race across America, and so you can check that podcast out to hear more about that. He is also the host of the nationally syndicated radio show, Amazing Americans. You can check out his website, jerryschemmel.com. Jerry, it's so great to have you back on Unpacking It. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great, Bryce. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. It must have been okay if you're having me back on, so I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Sorry, it's been a couple years, but we're excited to catch up. And before we kind of dive in, talk a little baseball and talk about what's been going on, I know that you're in the Denver area, of course. And so one of the big stories coming out of the sports world, Jokic being named the MVP. And some people have questioned that. And since I got to get kind of your insight as a former broadcaster with the Nuggets, how good is Jokic? How impressive was this season? And how deserving, I assume, that you would defend his back-to-back MVPs.
Well, let me preface by saying I'm a little biased because I get to see him most every night. So he's a unicorn, Bryce. We've never seen like this guy before. I mean, he's a point center that's 7'1" that can do everything, and probably a little underrated defensive player. When he really bears down, he can be a pretty good low post defender. But people got upset last year because he won the MVP. And he actually had better numbers. He had a better season this year than he did last year. And now there might be other guys that kind of caught up with him a little bit, but he's a better player. He's an improved player from last year, which we didn't think could happen. So, again, I'm biased, but I think he deserved it last year. I think he deserves it again this year. First player to history with 2,000 points, 1,000 rebounds, and 500 assists in a season. First player's ever done that in NBA history. So I think it's arguable, but I think it's a little tough to argue that he should not have gotten that MVP.
It is remarkable. And gosh, when you think about those numbers, so I know some injuries, of course, were the story this year, but what's it going to take for the Nuggets to kind of get over the hump, get to the next step?
Yeah, they got to get healthy. They're missing all year long, other than 9 games from Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray was out the whole year. Those are 2 really good players, probably top 20, 15, 20 players in the league in terms of talent, Bryce. And when you're missing those 2 guys, you're not going to be successful. And to get to the playoffs and be 12 or 13 games over 500 in the regular season, I thought was number one, a credit to Jokic and the job he did this year, but maybe a tip of the hat to the head coach as well, Michael Malone, the job that he did trying to piece things together and get to the playoffs and get that 6th seed. So they got to to answer your question, they've got to get healthy. They got to get those 2 guys back 100%, which looks like it might happen. It's feasible. It's a possibility. And then see what you got. Then you got 3 superstars. Then you got 3 guys that could take you to the promised land. So get healthy and see what happens. But when that happens, I think it's going to be pretty exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah, you hate seeing the injuries. We want to see the full lineup and see what all these teams have. And it's been fun, these NBA playoffs, because a lot of competitive series and good teams, but the Nuggets want to be in that mix for sure. Well, you're, of course, associated with the Colorado Rockies now, and you're back with the franchise. And so I want to hear a little bit about this story, because you were with the Rockies for 10 years, 2 years off. Now you're back. Take us into what you can share as far as kind of how all that happened and how excited you are to be back.
Well, Bryce, I wish I could tell you that I just took a couple COVID years off, but that's not really accurate. So, in 2019, I'm actually packing. It's 2020, so 2 years ago. I'm packing my bag to go to spring training, and I don't work for the team. I work for iHeartMedia, which is the rights holder. And I got a call saying, "Hey, did you hear about all the cuts across by the program director at the station, the flagship station?" And he said, "You hear about all the cuts that iHeart made around the country because of bankruptcy? We cut 950 jobs across the country." And I said, "No, I hadn't heard that." He goes, "Well, you're one of them." Oh. And so I lost my job in a bankruptcy payroll cut, basically. And it turns out almost 1,100 people that week lost their jobs across the country. So, and I was actually, Bryce, ready to kind of, I've been 20 years in the NBA, 10 in Major League Baseball. I've been an incredible career. I wasn't hurting financially. I thought, I'll just walk away. It's been a great career. I'll go do something else that God wants me to do. And then 2 days before the season, 2 days before the regular season this year, before opening day in 2022, I got a call from that same guy that I had not heard from in over 2 years saying, "Are you interested in coming back? Because the guy that replaced you refuses to take the COVID vaccine, and Major League Baseball won't let him work." So I said, "Sign me up. I'm ready. I'll come back." So 2 days before the opener, no spring training, no reps in spring training at all. I jumped back in, and it's been great. I'm excited to be back in that saddle.
Wow, what a story. Well, going back, so they didn't even really tell you, just all of a sudden, who told you the news that you were being let go? That seemed funny.
The program director station, the same guy that called me and said, "You want to come
Okay.
back?" And I literally, Bryce hadn't talked to him in 2 years. So I thought it was important when I got let go not to burn bridges, not to say anything bad about it. And I was honestly just thinking about, all right, what's the next step for me in God's plan? And I thought, well, so if it's away from broadcasting and to give him glory somehow, then I'll do it. And I had a bunch of irons in the fire. And then 2 years later, I got a call from that same program director that I had not talked to in 2 years. And he said, "Hey, come on back." And I was ready to go.
That's exciting. So during those 2 years, then how did God work in your life? What was maybe some value or benefits to taking those 2 years kind of away from baseball?
Yeah, I got to do some charity stuff that I had been thinking about doing for a long time, Bryce, that I'd never done before. Was able to clear my schedule to speak to a lot of Christian groups, a lot of churches, a lot of other groups that just to kind of share the gospel a little bit, which I had been restricted because of my schedule. I just didn't have time to do all. I couldn't say yes to everything. I was able to say yes to all those invitations, which was just an incredible blessing to me. And then I started doing college games again. I got back in that amateur circuit and did University of Northern Colorado football and basketball with Ed McCaffrey as the head coach for football with the UNC Bears, and I did this past season, which is really fun for me. That was just outstanding to be back away from pro athletes for a while and back with the amateur players, and just the humility and the friendliness and just the care that everybody gave each other was really refreshing for me. So I had a great 2 years. I'm happy to be back, but I had a great 2 years away.
Well, gosh, there's a lot to unpack there. Uh, First up, just I guess being back, what did you realize you missed the most, and what has maybe been the joy of being back?
This might sound a little strange, a little weird for some viewers, but just pulling back in the ballpark, on opening day at Coors Field, pulling that parking lot and walking into the stadium again, walking into that ballpark, it just hit me how much I enjoyed it, how much I just love coming to the ballpark and describing a baseball game. So walking through, some of the old security people were there. I said hi, and I got up in the broadcast booth. And I just took this big breath, like, "God, thank you. This is, you gave me some talent to do this, and now you put me back in the saddle again. Thank you." So I think I never took it for granted, Bryce. There was never a day in 30 years where I wasn't happy to drive to the arena or the ballpark. I was excited about going, but I didn't realize how much I enjoyed it being there and just in that environment and the people, and then describing a game on the radio, something I really missed. And I didn't realize it till I got back in that building.
I love it. So special, and I've been to one game at Coors, so it was fun. Absolutely. Well, so even let's even go back a little bit, because you talk about just how much you enjoyed that every time you went to the arena and the ballpark. When did you know that you wanted to be a broadcaster? And even growing up, what was your dream job, or what did you think you wanted to do? And then ultimately, how did you land in the broadcasting direction?
Yeah, I grew up in a small town in South Dakota, and we were about 3 hours away from the Twin Cities. So I listened to Twins games all the time, and I thought the ultimate job, the dream job, would be a Major League Baseball announcer. And I thought, oh, that'd be really cool. So I got a degree in broadcast journalism, and my junior year in college, I was playing baseball at a school called Washburn University in Topeka, Kansas. My junior year in college, I realized that I wasn't going to be a professional baseball player. I just wasn't good enough. And I thought the next best thing, the most fun besides being a player, might be a broadcaster. So I kind of jumped into that realm, started doing high school games, moved up to small college, did minor league basketball for a long time, and just loved it, loved every minute. And that first game I did was a high school football game. And I thought, man, this is really fun. This is what I want to do the rest of my career. And it's unfolded in a beautiful way, thanks to God's blessings.
Amen. Absolutely. So now that you kind of even reflect back on your career and having these different stops and different sports and different levels and that sort of thing, what are some of the big differences? You kind of described that with the at Northern Colorado, but between even the NBA and Major League Baseball, as far as calling a game and being in different environments with these different sports? What comes to mind?
Yeah, in basketball and the NBA and Major League Baseball are just two different animals completely as a play-by-play guy. In the NBA, it's fast-paced action. You're trying to keep up with the ball. The ball's moving all the time. The score's changing all the time. And as a play-by-play guy, there isn't a whole lot to do other than just call the play-by-play. And so it's rapid fire. In baseball, there's a pitch, and then what happens? Nothing for 30 seconds. And so you have to fill in, and you have to have background and stories, and you can rely on stats, but you don't want to use that as a crutch. So you got to be more conversational. You've got to fill in the listener more with background stuff, because there isn't a whole lot happening other than a pitch and when the ball is put in the air or on the ground. So it's a totally different thing. You have to slow down. You have to pace yourself. And I just always think about, hey, it's a conversation between me and Bryce, at dinner, talking about baseball and getting excited about it. And that's kind of the way I approach it in baseball. In basketball, it's different. You just keep up and try to entertain as best you can.
There's nothing like it. That's for sure. And in college, I did basketball and football, and man, it was so different between those two. Just from your personality standpoint, which sport fits you the best? What's maybe
I
the
think
most natural?
baseball, it's hard to, I almost want to flip that coin, but love doing the NBA. Did it for 20 years and really miss it, and really miss that environment and calling a game, because it's so emotional. It's so rapid fire that it's just a great challenge. But I was a baseball player in college. I coached at college level, and baseball has always been my number one sport. So, like I said, my dream job, I always thought, would be Major League Baseball announcer. And so I think I would probably favor baseball. If I had to choose between an NBA playoff game and a Major League Baseball game, I would probably choose Major League Baseball.
All right, that's fair. That's fair.
Mhm.
Well, you spent this past fall with Northern Colorado, and you mentioned Ed McCaffrey being the head coach of that team. I'm here in Charlotte, and so I know we have some Panthers fans that listen to the podcast, and of course Christian McCaffrey, star running back. So, what was that experience being like around Ed? And I guess, what did you gather from him that you can say, yeah, he was able to have a son make it to the NFL, follow his footsteps
Yeah.
based on kind of the type of coach that he was?
Yeah, first of all, I knew Ed a little bit because he and I had worked in the same building. He did color on the Denver Broncos for a couple of years, and we were on the same station. I didn't know him well. We weren't friends at all, but I knew who he was and passed him a couple of times. So I was very anxious to get to know him, because he had been in the media. So he gets the media and very cooperative and all that kind of stuff. And I think he stepped into a situation, to be honest with you, Bryce, a little bit more difficult than he thought it was going to be. I mean, the UNC plays in the Big Sky Conference, which is a really good football conference, especially. And they had 5 teams in the top 20 in their division at one point this season, not 25, but top 20. So they got beat up pretty good. But I think Ed learned a lot, and in year 2 moving forward, which will be this fall, I think he'll be that much better. But I think it was a tremendous experience for me. I mean, he was very open about, as well. His son was the quarterback at UNC,
Right.
and his other son was the offensive coordinator. So it was basically the McCaffrey gang. And so I told the other radio announcers, Bryce, I said, if you don't know a last name, just say McCaffrey. You'll probably have a chance to get it right if you don't know what player. So no, it was a great experience. We only won 3 games, but it was really fun to work with Ed. Did the coaching show with him, and like I said, he's a terrific coach and going to be that much better moving forward.
Gosh, that's cool. I remember watching him as a Bronco player growing up, and was an Elway fan. So, and rooted for those Broncos teams that won a couple of Super Bowls there. So that's neat. Well, that's great. You got to be a part of that. Well, you mentioned that during those 2 years, you were able to do more speaking. And so I'm curious kind of what your approach is to speaking. What are you most passionate? You mentioned sharing the gospel, which is nothing more important than that. But what's your approach when you go and talk to different groups, and what's your passion for speaking like?
Yeah, Bryce, all my talks, whether it's in a secular environment or a Christian environment, involve a plane crash that I survived, and becoming a Christian as a result of that plane crash. And I share that story. And with the secular group, I kind of give life lessons from it, and how a guy that got his life given back to me in a crash where everybody around me died. I mean, I was surrounded by people who died in that crash. And I got my life given back to me. So I got a second chance that a lot of people don't get. And so share life lessons on, take advantage of life, live it to its fullest, all the things that we've heard before, but maybe coming from a plane crash survivor, it's a little bit different perspective. In a Christian environment, I share my testimony. Becoming a Christian after the crash, really struggled with post-trauma stress disorder and got in a place where I was at rock bottom and just couldn't pick myself back up, and turned to God and found his son. And my life is completely turned around from that day forward. I mean, this man, Jesus, has completely changed me. He's changed me from you wouldn't like me, Bryce, before the plane crash. I mean, I was really egotistical, and I was all about me, and I was going to be the next Bob Costas or Al Michaels, and really full of myself. And that plane crash and becoming a Christian and giving myself to Christ completely changed that, changed my heart from the inside. And I'm so thankful for that. Number one, that it happened. Number two, that I can share it.
Amen. I'm so thankful that God allowed you to keep living, and that you've been obedient to his call on your life to be able to share that story. And so that was back in 1989. And so you've been on quite the journey since then. But as far as kind of recently, how does God continue to transform you? And what are some of the things that maybe you've been, or areas that you've been growing in lately, or things that you've been learning even at this stage of your journey with Jesus?
Yeah, it's an interesting when you ask that question, because when I lost the Rockies job, I realized that my identity could not be as a broadcaster. It had to be as a follower of Christ. And I thought, oh, I've lost that job. And it's interesting when you're not the voice of a Major League Baseball team anymore. People look at you differently. You lose some friends. You don't have people calling you and asking for tickets, or you find out who your true friends are. I guess I should say that. And I realized that maybe some of my identity was wrapped up in being a broadcaster. 20 years in the NBA and 10 in Major League Baseball. That's how people knew me. They knew me as a plane crash survivor and as a big league broadcaster. And when that was taken away, that perspective for me changed a little bit, and it changed for the better, Bryce. It really did. It made me realize that my identity is not in that radio booth. It's not in that arena. It's as a follower and a son of Christ. And that hit home for me. And I became very comfortable with the fact that I wasn't the voice of the Rockies anymore, that I was now Jerry Schemmel, a follower of Jesus, and not Jerry Schemmel, the voice of the Rockies. So that was just a great learning experience for me. It's just a path that I never thought I would go down, but it was just eye-opening for me, changed my heart, and I'm so thankful for it.
I love that, because then God gave the opportunity back to you. So he taught you some things, grew you, and then now there you are back in the booth.
I say that to him all the time. I'm like, man, thank you for taking me down that road, and thank you for those lessons I learned in 2 years. And by the way, to take 2 years off, the 2 COVID years, that was pretty good 2 years to take off if I had to take off 2 years. So I thank you for that as well. But no, I do. I thank you for giving my job back to me, which I love so much, and feel like he's given me a little bit of gift to do, but more importantly, to appreciate not having it now that I do have it.
That's a great story. And I want to go back to the plane crash a little bit. And I don't know exactly how to word this, but to me, I imagine you're filled with such gratitude that God gave you the second chance at life. And at the same time, I imagine there's a level of pressure that you feel by being one of the only survivors of this crash. And so how have you navigated that over the years, and what have you kind of learned maybe through that, which I imagine some level of wrestling?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great point, Bryce. And I think after the crash, I really felt that pressure. I mean, there were so many people that, well, you survived in this group of people who didn't, big things are ahead, and you got to be president of the United States, stuff like that. The people were well-intentioned when they were saying it, but I just felt like, wow, maybe I have that obligation to do something gigantic in my life. And as time went on, Bryce, after that crash, I realized that wasn't the case. I realized that I survived for multiple reasons. One of them might just be to be a great dad. I got 2 kids, and I didn't have kids before the crash. And, maybe it's just like, maybe this taught you how to be a better dad and a better husband and a better friend. And the most important thing that happened after that crash, and because of the crash, was my finding Jesus. So this is the kind of way I look at it, Bryce, and hope this makes sense. But when I look back at the crash, I see God saying to me, and I had no spiritual foundation whatsoever before that crash. I mean, nothing, zero. I'll get a confession to make. I never picked up a Bible or opened a Bible in the first 30 years of my life. Zero.
Fascinating.
I had never opened a Bible, and I just brushed all that away. And after the crash, that all came back to me. And so when I look back at it, I see God saying this to me, Bryce. I see God saying, Jerry, with this plane crash, I finally got your attention. It took 30 years in a plane crash, but I finally got your attention. And now that I do, I want to tell you about my son. And more importantly, I want you to spend the rest of your life telling other people about my son. And that's why I survived that plane crash. It wasn't to become governor of Colorado or president of the United States or anything like it. Was so that I could spend the rest of my life trying to tell other people about Jesus, kind of like I'm doing right now with you and your podcast.
And I'm so glad you are. Gosh, what a powerful way that God moved in your life. And it's fascinating to hear that, because I grew up in the church. And so sometimes I don't have that perspective of 30 years to the Bible and church and those types of things. And so because you have that background, I imagine that you can relate well to a certain group of people. And so in speaking to some of our listeners today that are followers of Jesus, that want to share their faith with a family member, with someone at work, somebody that may be far from God or just doesn't have an understanding of who God is, what can you share to kind of help people and encourage people in sharing and witnessing?
Yeah, there's two groups of people out there, as you know, Bryce. One's a group that's been saved, and the other one's a group that has not been. And for the group that's been saved, I tell that group all the time. I said, you've got this eternal life that you have now because you've given your life to Christ. So you've got your destiny secured. So if you want to share that with other people, I don't think it works to go hit them over the head with a Bible. I really don't. I think that's counterproductive, actually. And I've got siblings that aren't saved, and I've tried every possible way to try to get them to think down that path and accept Christ as Savior, and it just hasn't happened. I think the biggest and the most important thing we do is live our lives the way Jesus wants us to live, and then people see that, and then. And for me, it's a little easier because they look at me as a plane crash survivor. All right, maybe he's got life figured out. He's got a second chance at it. So I want them to see the way I live and the way that I communicate and the stuff that I say on podcasts like you have. I want people to see that, and then maybe they can say, you know what, maybe he's got it figured out. Maybe I want a little slice of that. But if I went to that same person and said, hey, here's the Bible, and you're going to hell if you don't accept Christ, I don't think that works very well. So for the group that has already accepted Christ and wants to share that, you don't have to tell people about Jesus. Just show people who Jesus is. And I think that's more effective than hitting them over the head.
It sure is. Absolutely. And so for you, who were some of those people that you were looking up to, following the crash, what were the steps that you took that God kind of led you down as far as seeing other people and even opening up the Bible and getting into church? What was that process like?
Yeah, it was pretty crazy for me, Bryce. There was the 10-month anniversary of the crash. So back in 1990, 10 months after the crash, I was just struggling. I mean, I didn't know what was happening. It was post-trauma stress disorder, which I didn't have diagnosed, but I was just struggling. I was survivor's guilt and anger and depression, all the stuff. My marriage is falling apart. My wife and I had been married 4 years. And I just sat down and I quit my job. I sat down in a chair on the 10-month anniversary of the crash and realized, Bryce, for the first time in my life, first time in 30 years, I was knocked down and I could not pick myself back up. I could not do this anymore on my own. And my wife was a beautiful Christian woman, had been so from the day I met her, and I kind of went along with that. And I went to church with her once in a while because, I was in love with her and I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. And if that meant going to church on Sunday, I was going to do that for her. Isn't it amazing what love can do to a man? It can make you go to church with a woman. That's a strong emotion right there, Bryce. Anyway, I thought about Diane and I thought, man, she had this strength and this thing she could draw on, which was a relationship with God and accepting his son, whoever that was, this guy named Jesus Christ. And I just kind of stayed away from all that. And I thought about that and I thought, what in the heck do I have to lose? Nothing else is working. And so I just closed my eyes and said a simple prayer in that moment. I just asked God to come into my life, not to save my marriage, get a new job, or come out of depression. It was, God, just give me something to hold on to because I can't do this by myself anymore. And Bryce, when I said that, and I know some people watching this will think it's corny, but I swear to you, it happened this way. When I said that, something came over me. It wasn't an audible voice. I wasn't going crazy. It wasn't a physical sensation. It was just this overwhelming feeling of peace and contentment that hit me that just said, because of what I had done, more importantly, the ally I just invited in my life, that eventually, not that moment or that night or the next day, but eventually I knew I was going to win every single battle. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I knew that because of who I was having fight this battle with me, I was going to win. And I went to bed that night and finally slept. I couldn't sleep for 10 months. And I woke up the next morning feeling the same way. And I thought, man, something has come over me. And that was the beginning for me.
Gosh, it's so powerful. And the praying wife, you can't mess with the praying wife or the praying mom as well. So God answers those prayers. And so now, how long have you been married to your wife?
36 years.
36 years.
You know what? By the way, that's going to be the name of my next book. You Can't Mess with a Praying Wife. That's a great title for a book, Bryce. Can I steal that from you?
Absolutely, absolutely. No, that's neat. I've got I've got a close friend of mine who I know his wife is praying for him. I'm praying for him, and know that God will answer that prayer eventually. It's just, you got to be patient. But for you, a plane crash was a part of the story, and it's amazing how God works through all these different things for us to become aware of who He is and how much He loves us, and the peace that He offers us. And so I love hearing that. I mean, it's very just describing that and taking us back to that moment for you. Very, very special.
Yeah,
Well,
I appreciate that. I'm a little embarrassed, Bryce, that it took a plane crash to get me to come around and see Jesus as my Savior, but I was pretty stubborn, and God did what He had to do, put me in a plane to get me this way.
For me, it was a donut that had a hole in it, and it was the donut man explaining that Jesus is the donut hole that fills our heart, and that's what did it for me. So
the donut man,
the donut, you know the donut man?
Oh yeah, my wife and I. Oh my gosh, I've heard all those songs 100 times. So good for you.
That God used him. So he'll use a lot of different things. So that's part of each of our stories for sure. Well, Jerry, gosh, I'm so encouraged to talk with you again today, and I feel like we've only scratched the surface. But before we go, I did want to ask you. Let me get the name right. So you're now the spokesperson for Louisiana brand hot sauce. So I love hot sauce. I'm not necessarily loyal to one brand or another, but I'm a hot sauce fan. But how did all this come about? And you must be passionate about hot sauce.
Oh, I do. I love spicy food, and I love Cajun food especially. And Louisiana brand hot sauce is actually a sponsor of Major League Baseball. So there are, I think, 13 teams, including the Rockies, that are a local sponsor. And so we're on the radio, and they came to me and said, "Hey, do you like you like spicy food?" I said, "I love it. I absolutely love that." And I was a Tabasco guy, and they, would you try this? And if you like it, would you be a spokesperson? So I'm not making any money. I'm doing it for the station and Major League Baseball, and I just have a lot of fun with it. So yeah, Louisiana brand hot sauce. You know what? It's really good. It's the best I've had, and I can't get enough of it now. It's pretty good.
That's cool. So it's a national brand then.
Yeah. It's
all right, I'll check it out.
Yep, it's made obviously outside of New Orleans in Louisiana, and they're branching out, and it's really good stuff. It's not overwhelmingly spicy, so you can add more than a drop or two, which I like. So I put a bunch in, but it's really good. But yeah, it's a national brand in Major League Baseball. We played the Texas Rangers, Bryce, opening our first road trip, and they have Louisiana brand hot sauce on their foul poles.
Gosh, that's cool. That's a good sponsor. You could get excited about promoting that for sure. Well, I guess last thing too. So the Rockies, we're talking to you. You guys have a game against San Francisco tonight. The team is 16-13 on the season. What's sort of the pulse of the team? What this kind of early half of the season? How are you kind of feeling from your vantage point?
Yeah, pretty optimistic actually. They struggled the last couple of years, the last two COVID years, and actually it's been 4 years now since they made the playoffs. But they beat everybody's expectations last year by winning 72 games, I think it was, or 76 games. And this year picked to win anywhere between 68 and 71. And I just think they're way better than that. I think they could flirt with being a 500 team. When you do that in Major League Baseball, you got a shot at being a wild card. So took 2 out of 3 from the mighty Dodgers in the opening series, and played very well at home. But some acquisitions have really helped this team. So very optimistic, and the new guys are just fun to be around. Guys like Chris Bryant, some others, that Randall Grichuk, and just really fun guys to be around. Great team players, great clubhouse guys. So we're excited. We're excited about the prospects in 2022.
Very cool. Well, that's awesome, and glad to hear you're back in the booth. And I know fans are excited about that as well. And Jerry, so good to catch up and have you back on Unpacking It. And thanks so much for joining us and sharing more about your story, and encourage people to check out the last podcast we did with Jerry as well. Talk more about being a cyclist. And so you got to hear about that and the documentary that he did called Godspeed. So his website, jerryschemmel.com. Jerry, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right. Hey, it was great to see you again, Bryce. Thanks for having me on. Thank you.
Absolutely. There's Jerry Schemmel joining us here on the Unpacking It podcast, presented by Medi-Share.